The Galactic Council thought they could break humanity with the brutal execution of one diplomat, but they were gravely mistaken. When Ambassador Gregor Marshall was burned alive in front of the galaxy's most powerful leaders, humanity didn't cry, mourn, or beg for mercy. Instead, they responded with something the Council couldn't have imagined: total, unrelenting war. What started as a single act of violence would ignite a firestorm that would reshape the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council had made a decision they thought was wise, a statement they believed would send a message to the rest of the universe. Ambassador Gregor Marshall, a seasoned diplomat from Earth, stood at the center of their chambers, bound to a chair, surrounded by the indifferent faces of the galaxy's most powerful species. The Zorathians, furious at humanity's audacity in negotiating terms they deemed disrespectful, had already condemned Marshall to death. Now, the Council would seal his fate. Marshall didn't flinch as the ceremonial flames were lit around him. His gaze remained unwavering, fixed on the faces of the Council members who had, no doubt, expected him to beg for mercy. That was the first mistake they made, underestimating humanity's ability to endure. The flames grew higher, licking the air, their heat intense enough to warp the very atmosphere. Still, Marshall didn't flinch. His lips twitched, as if he was biting back a grin. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" he asked, his voice calm, his tone almost mocking. The Zorathians sneered, their large, reptilian eyes narrowed. They'd never seen a human so casual in the face of certain death. Most species, especially those who had come to the Council seeking peace, would beg for mercy, plead for their lives. Not humans. They had a reputation for stubbornness, and it seemed Marshall was here to prove it. The Council speaker, an insectoid creature whose voice was as cold as its exoskeleton, raised a clawed hand. "Your arrogance will be your undoing, human. Do you have any last words before we silence you?" Marshall took a deep breath, his body now covered in a sheen of sweat from the heat, but still unbowed. "Yes, you've just made the biggest mistake of your lives, and trust me, you'll regret it." The fire intensified, but still he didn't scream. His mind, sharp and calculating, was already 2 steps ahead. The Council, with all their advanced technology and centuries of power, had no idea what they had just unleashed. Meanwhile, the human delegates watching from their distant stations on Earth felt their hearts sink. They had never imagined the Council would resort to something so archaic, so savage. The execution wasn't just a political move, it was personal. Marshall had been more than just a diplomat, he was a symbol of Earth's effort to avoid bloodshed. Yet, here they were, watching as that symbol was burned to ash. But the humans, resilient as always, refused to let despair settle in. Some whispered of retaliation, others spoke of a future where humanity would make sure the Council never forgot this moment. Earth was watching, and so was the rest of the galaxy. Marshall's death wouldn't be the end, it would be the spark that ignited the fire. Back in the Council chamber, as the flames finally began to die down, the human ambassador's body slumped, lifeless, his clothes blackened and charred. The hall was silent, the only sound the crackling of the last embers. The Zorathian leader, who had initiated the violence, looked pleased. "Let this be a lesson to all who challenge the galactic order," it hissed. But the last words of Ambassador Marshall echoed in the minds of everyone who heard them. "You'll regret this, mark my words." The Council's chamber fell eerily silent, the weight of his defiant words hanging in the air like a storm cloud on the verge of breaking. The arrogance of the Council was palpable, but so was the realization that something had changed, something fundamental. They had underestimated humanity, and worse, they had underestimated Earth's capacity for vengeance. As the Council members filed out, congratulating themselves on the successful execution, none of them noticed the small, almost imperceptible flicker in the communications hub. The first ripple had been sent across the galaxy, and while the Council was too busy patting themselves on the back, Earth's response was already in motion. Back on Earth, a quiet buzz began to grow: whispers, phone calls, urgent meetings in bunkers and boardrooms. Earth's leaders didn't cry. They didn't negotiate. Instead, they made one very clear decision: no more peace talks. No more diplomacy. No more asking nicely. Humanity had a reputation for forgiveness, but that was only if you didn't mess with their own. And the Galactic Council, well, they had just earned themselves an invite to the last party they'd ever attend. Somewhere far across the galaxy, an old human general sat in his office, stared at the hologram of the burning diplomat, and cracked a smile. "Looks like we're about to make a lot of friends," he muttered, already sending orders to mobilize Earth's fleet. And with that, the first steps toward war began to echo through the galaxy, leaving the Council to wonder just how bad their mistake had been. But it was too late now. The spark had been lit, and humanity's wrath was coming. The galaxy held its breath. For days after the execution, nothing seemed to stir on Earth. The silence was deafening, a collective holding of air, as though the entire planet was waiting for something monumental to happen. News outlets reported the tragedy over and over, dissecting every detail, but not once did anyone speak of vengeance. There were no rallies, no marches, no outcry from the streets. It was a calm unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed before, a calm that made the Council and the Zorathians nervous. Behind the scenes, though, Earth was far from quiet. The military was mobilizing, but not with the usual fanfare. No speeches, no parades, no signs declaring "we will never forget," just a cold, methodical march to war. The leaders of Earth, both political and military, met in undisclosed locations, their faces grim and hard with a single purpose: retaliation. They knew the Zorathians had crossed a line, but they also knew that the real threat lay not just in the destruction of their ambassador, but in what the Council might do next. No, the quiet was not a sign of submission, it was a sign of something much worse: preparation. In military command centers, deep underground bunkers, and aboard the fleet's massive warships, Earth's forces were being readied in near total secrecy. There were no broadcasts calling for peace, no diplomats pleading for calm. Instead, the global leaders exchanged one simple question: what are we waiting for? Then, the answer arrived. A single transmission broke the silence, its content short, to the point, and enough to set everything into motion. "We've had enough." Those 3 words were enough. The rest of the galaxy might not have realized it yet, but those words were the match to a powder keg. Across every Earth military base, warships began to stir, engines roaring to life, as if waking from a long slumber. Soldiers, pilots, and technicians rushed to their posts with urgency that bordered on frenzy. Within hours, the first wave of humanity's greatest weaponry took to the stars. The ships were sleek, built for speed, power, and precision, an intricate blend of cutting-edge technology that had long been kept hidden. The world had watched humanity's secret military projects for years, but no one had truly understood their capabilities. Until now. There were no more excuses, no more discussions. Only war. Aboard the flagship Liberty, General Sarah Kellner, a woman who had seen the worst humanity had to offer in her career, stood before the holographic map of the galaxy. Her fingers traced the path to the Galactic Council's capital, a path that would soon be illuminated by the fires of vengeance. "We don't need to be the biggest fleet in the galaxy," Kellner muttered to herself. "We just need to be the angriest." The first battleships, monstrous in size and armed with weapons that could shatter moons, moved into position. Human warships were known for their swiftness and devastating firepower, but this time they had something else: a cause. Their mission was clear: eradicate the threat the Galactic Council represented and send a message to the universe that humanity would never be cowed. On Earth, a strange kind of calm had overtaken the population. They weren't scared. They weren't terrified. In fact, many felt an odd sense of anticipation. There was no doubt that this wasn't going to be an easy war, but humanity had one thing that no other species in the galaxy had: a ruthless determination to fight for their own. The rest of the galaxy could tremble in their boots, but humanity had already made up their mind. This was personal. This was justice. As Earth's fleets surged into deep space, a strange thing began to happen across the galaxy. The Council's so-called allies, those who had sworn fealty to the Order, began to question their loyalty. Some even wondered aloud if siding with the Council was really in their best interest. Rumors spread. Rumors of human resilience, of Earth's ability to strike without mercy, and most importantly, rumors of how one human diplomat had defied death itself. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council found itself alone. There was no one to help them now. The galaxy was divided, with some whispering that the Council had gone too far. that humanity could not be contained or controlled, and Earth, for the first time in history, had something far more powerful than weapons, the absolute certainty that they were in the right. Then the next transmission came. This one wasn't from Earth, but from the Council's central hub. It was a desperate plea, an ultimatum wrapped in panic. Humanity, stop. We have made a grave mistake. We will offer reparations. The message was abruptly cut off. It didn't matter. By then, Earth's response was already in motion. There would be no negotiations, no reparations, no second chances. The humans had made it clear. The only thing they wanted was the complete and utter dismantling of the Galactic Council. The calm had ended. The quiet had been replaced with the thunderous roar of humanity's war machines. The galaxy was about to learn a valuable lesson. Never, ever mistake humanity's silence for weakness. And somewhere, deep in the heart of Earth's command centers, General Kellner smiled. The Council didn't know it yet, but they had just unleashed the most terrifying thing in the galaxy, the wrath of a human wrong. The battle began long before the first shots were fired. As Earth's fleets made their way toward the Galactic Council's capital, the galaxy held its collective breath. But for humanity, this was no ordinary military campaign. It was personal. And the human war machine had one simple rule: don't stop until it's over. Admiral Jax O'Reilly, commanding the Vanguard, Earth's flagship, stood at the helm, his face hard as stone. He wasn't in the mood for speeches or stirring words. The time for that was long past. It was time to teach the Council a lesson they'd never forget. "Bring up the battle map," he ordered, his voice cool and steady. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the stark contrast between Earth's fleets, sleek, fast, and efficient, and the Council's defenses, massive but outdated, bloated with years of overconfidence. The humans didn't need size to win this fight. They needed precision. "Status report?" O'Reilly asked, glancing at his officers. "All systems are go, sir," Lieutenant Olivia Torres replied. "We've got the entire fleet in formation. We're ready to show the Council exactly why you don't burn a human diplomat alive." O'Reilly's lips curled into a thin smile. That's the spirit. The plan was simple. The human fleet would approach the Council's capital under the cover of stealth technology, avoiding detection until the last possible moment. Then, once they were within range, they'd strike with a fury that would leave no room for retaliation. The Council thought they had the upper hand, but humanity had always been the underdog, until now. Meanwhile, on Earth, the public's mood had shifted from disbelief to fierce pride. Citizens everywhere followed the news, their eyes glued to the broadcasts. There were no protests, no cries for peace, just the steady hum of a nation united in its desire for justice. People didn't ask questions anymore. They didn't wonder if this was the right course of action. They were done with that. The death of one diplomat had done what centuries of diplomacy had failed to do. It had united humanity in a common cause. The entire planet was behind the war effort, cheering their fleet on as they made their way through space. Back on the Vanguard, the countdown to the final assault had begun. The warships hummed with power, their systems locked and loaded. In the control room, officers ran through checks, ensuring every gun, missile, and shield was ready. The anticipation was palpable. "You know," Torres said with a grin, "I've always wanted to say this, but it's go time." "Then let's make it count," O'Reilly replied. "Remember, we're not just sending a message to the Council. We're sending it to every species that thinks they can mess with humanity." The human fleet entered the outer orbit of the Galactic Council's capital undetected. It was eerily quiet, a tension hanging in the void. The Vanguard's stealth technology had done its job. Until now. At exactly the right moment, the fleet dropped out of stealth, appearing in full force just outside the Council's defenses. The Council had no time to react. "Lock on all targets," O'Reilly commanded. "Let's make it look like a show of absolute unrelenting force." And just like that, a first volley was fired. The sheer power of the blast was enough to shake nearby ships. the shock waves reverberating through space. The Council's defense systems, overwhelmed and underprepared, didn't even have time to activate their shields. The first wave of human missiles found their targets, massive Council warships, now reduced to molten scrap in seconds. It was like a well-practiced dance. The human ships moved with precision, coordinating strikes that tore through the enemy's lines like a hot knife through butter. There was no hesitation, no mercy. The Zorathian ships, once proud and mighty, were now in full retreat, their commanders scrambling to find a way to salvage their forces. But Earth's fleet was relentless. The human soldiers were trained for this. This wasn't just about winning. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. By now, the Council was fully aware of what was happening. Desperate orders flew back and forth across their comms, but it was all for nothing. Human fighters, agile and fast, tore through the skies like vultures on a hunt, picking off the weak and the slow. On the ground, the once glorious city of the Council was now a war zone, the streets filled with fires and debris. Every last piece of the Council's infrastructure was falling apart under humanity's wrath. Admiral O'Reilly stood at the bridge, watching as the chaos unfolded. His face remained impassive, but inside he was enjoying every second of it. He had spent years preparing for this moment, and now it was finally happening. Earth was finally showing the galaxy what it could do when pushed too far. "General Kellner?" O'Reilly's voice crackled over the comms. "How's it looking over there?" "Better than expected," General Kellner replied from the Liberty, her voice steely. "We've taken out most of their heavy hitters, but don't expect them to go down without a fight." "No one ever does," O'Reilly said, smirking, "but we're in control now." As the battle raged on, the once proud Galactic Council began to fracture under the pressure. They had never anticipated this kind of war. They thought they could intimidate humanity into submission, that one brutal execution would silence them. Instead, they had sparked something far worse than they could ever have imagined. Humanity didn't fight for power or glory. They fought for something deeper, something far more dangerous: their pride. And as the Council's defenses continued to crumble, one thing became painfully clear: you never, ever underestimate a human with a grudge. The war was turning in humanity's favor, but the Galactic Council was far from giving up. From their battered command center, Council members scrambled to coordinate a defense, their arrogance slowly eroding with each failed counterattack. The once imposing military force was now on its heels, frantically trying to maintain some semblance of order in the chaos. But no matter how they tried, humanity's war machine just wouldn't stop. Admiral O'Reilly stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, his eyes fixed on the battle unfolding outside. The once proud fleets of the Council were now nothing more than debris drifting through space. He smiled, but there was no joy in it, just the satisfaction of a mission well executed. "We've almost done it," he murmured, glancing over at Lieutenant Torres. "We're pushing them back faster than expected," Torres replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic console. "They don't even know how to react anymore. It's like watching a wolf chase a rabbit." O'Reilly chuckled darkly, except the rabbit just got its hands on a flamethrower. The battle was still far from over, though. There were more Council ships left, and their desperation was growing with every passing minute. Earth's fleet was quick, precise, and unrelenting, but they had underestimated one thing: the Council's ability to throw itself into a losing fight just to save face. The Zorathians and their allies were no strangers to failure, and they had a nasty habit of going down swinging, even if it meant a slow, painful death. "Admiral," came a voice from the comms, "we've got a large fleet emerging from the planet's atmosphere. Looks like reinforcements." O'Reilly's expression hardened. "We were expecting this. Torres, ready the secondary fleet." "Already on it," she replied, her fingers moving like lightning. "We'll make sure they wish they stayed in orbit." Humanity had planned for this moment. As powerful as the Council's reinforcements were, they were nothing compared to the sheer unpredictability of Earth's tactics. The humans knew their enemies well. If there was one thing the Council was known for, it was their tendency to overestimate their own power. And while the Council scrambled to bring their fleet into position, humanity's ships were already adjusting their strategy to exploit every weakness. The reinforcements arrived, a fleet of titanic proportions, but humanity had the edge in speed and precision. Within minutes, Earth's ships had surrounded the newly arrived forces, locking them into a battle they hadn't prepared for. Earth's fighters tore through the skies like predators, attacking from angles that the Council's heavy ships couldn't defend against. The human warships, agile and ruthless, danced around their opponents, delivering blows that shattered shields and ignited explosions in a dazzling display of destruction. Meanwhile, on the ground, General Kellner's forces had pushed through the Council's defense lines, swiftly overtaking their cities. The human soldiers didn't take prisoners. As they advanced, they leveled everything in their path, ensuring that nothing would be left standing when the dust settled. They'd been ordered to send a message, and that message was clear. No one messes with humanity and gets away with it. "General, we've taken their main command center," a soldier reported, sweat running down his face. "What now?" Kellner's eyes glinted with something close to amusement. "Now? Now we remind them who's in charge." She turned to her team, all battle-hardened veterans who had seen it all. "We've done enough damage for today. Let's give them a taste of what's coming." The message was simple. Humanity wasn't here to negotiate. They weren't here to make peace or offer concessions. The Council had started this war, and now Earth was going to finish it. Back in space, O'Reilly watched as the new reinforcements disintegrated under Earth's relentless assault. The speed of the victory was shocking but not unexpected. Humanity's strategies were different, chaotic, unpredictable, and terrifyingly effective. As the last of the Council's reinforcements crumbled, O'Reilly gave a small nod. "We'll be done here by the end of the week," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "But we're not stopping. Not yet." "What's the plan after that, sir?" Torres asked. O'Reilly paused, his eyes glinting with a cold fire. "We take the fight to their heart. It's time to end this once and for all." The warships continued their relentless advance, Earth's fleets now closing in on the Galactic Council's capital itself. Every move was calculated, every weapon primed for maximum destruction. The Council had underestimated humanity's resilience, and they had underestimated how far Earth would go to avenge one of their own. The humans were a force unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, imperfect, messy, but utterly unstoppable when backed into a corner. And so, as the last remnants of the Council's defenses crumbled, a message rippled across the galaxy, one that would resonate for centuries to come. Humanity didn't fight because they were strong. They fought because they were pissed. And that was something no one, not even the mightiest of galactic empires, could ever defeat. The Council may have started the fire, but humanity was the one who was going to watch it burn. The Galactic Council was stumbling, wounded but not yet finished. The human assault had been relentless, and their fleet had torn through the heart of the Council's defenses. Yet, even now, as the Council's remaining forces regrouped, there was no mistaking it, humanity had forced them into a corner. And there was only one thing left to do: fight back with everything they had. On Earth, the mood had shifted from anger to an almost eerie calm. People were no longer watching the battle unfold with nervousness or uncertainty. They watched with pride. The quiet had returned, but this time it was a silence before the final strike. No one doubted what would happen next. Humanity wasn't just fighting for revenge, they were fighting for their place in the galaxy. Inside the Vanguard, Admiral O'Reilly stood by the tactical console, watching as the remaining Council ships regrouped. They were desperate now. They knew they had no hope of victory, but their pride wouldn't allow them to surrender. It was the same mistake the Council had always made: they couldn't understand humanity's drive. Their own arrogance had led them to believe they were the rulers of the galaxy. Now they were about to learn that no one rules over humanity. "Admiral," Torres said, her voice cutting through his thoughts, "they're preparing for one last stand. It's a desperate move, but they're trying to consolidate their forces." O'Reilly raised an eyebrow, a small grin curling on his lips. "Desperate is what we do best." "Do we give them the honor of a final battle?" Torres asked. O'Reilly turned his gaze toward the holographic map, where the last of the Council's ships were slowly forming up in the center of the sector. Give them an honor? No, we give them a lesson. The final push was on. The human fleet surged forward, the vast armada moving like a single living entity, converging on the Council's last bastion of defense. It was a massive show of force, a demonstration of humanity's will to win, no matter the odds. As the fleet approached, O'Reilly's voice cut through the comms with a crisp order. Lock all weapons. Target their engines. We're not here for a fair fight. There was no hesitation. The human fleet descended on the Council's last remaining ships like a swarm of angry hornets, each strike delivering a message that needed no words. The Council had been given every chance to retreat, every opportunity to surrender. They had refused. Now, humanity would finish what they had started. The battle was brutal. The Council's ships tried to counter, to fight back with whatever they had left, but it was futile. Humanity's forces were too quick, too ruthless, and too efficient. The Council's fleets were no match for the coordinated, lightning-fast strikes of Earth's ships. Each battle ended with the same outcome: another Zorathian warship drifting lifeless through space, its engines cold and silent. As O'Reilly watched, his thoughts drifted back to the beginning of this war. The execution of the human diplomat had seemed like a small act of cruelty at first, one that might have been dismissed by the rest of the galaxy. But it had ignited something in humanity. It had lit a fuse that the Council could never have anticipated. The human desire for justice, for retribution, had fueled every shot, every strike. And now, with the final enemy fleet in front of them, humanity's wrath was palpable. The Council would pay for every life lost. Meanwhile, on the ground, General Kellner's forces had reached the heart of the Council's capital. It was a ghost town now, the once bustling streets now littered with rubble and the remains of fallen defenders. Human soldiers moved through the desolation, their eyes scanning for any survivors. There were none. The last of the Council's leadership had fled, leaving the capital a shell of its former self. Kellner stood in the middle of the wreckage, looking out over the battlefield. "We did what we had to do," she said quietly. "But let's make sure they know we're not finished. This is just the beginning." Her words were more than a rallying cry, they were a declaration. The Council had learned the hard way that humanity couldn't be intimidated. And now, every corner of the galaxy would know that Earth's wrath was something to be feared. Back in space, the final blow was being delivered. The last of the Council's warships attempted a last-ditch maneuver, but it was too little, too late. Earth's fleet moved in, encircling the remaining ships and obliterating them in a final wave of firepower. The void of space filled with the silent screams of the Zorathian Empire as they crumbled before humanity's fury. Admiral O'Reilly looked out over the destruction. "Mission complete," he said with a finality that could be felt in his voice. He turned to his officers, who were all silently watching the screens in awe. "Prepare the report for Earth," he continued. "Let's make sure the whole galaxy knows that humanity isn't just some backwater planet anymore. We're the ones they're going to fear from now on." The message was clear, and it was echoing across the cosmos: never underestimate humanity. The war was over, but the repercussions would be felt for generations. The Galactic Council had thought they could snuff out a human diplomat and walk away unscathed. They had thought they could wipe humanity off the map with a single brutal act. What they hadn't counted on was Earth's determination, its ruthlessness, its unyielding will to survive. Now, as the remnants of the Council's once proud fleet drifted in space, one thing was certain: this was a war that would go down in history. And in the future, when anyone dared to cross humanity, they'd be reminded of one simple truth: the price of messing with Earth was far too high. The Galactic Council was shattered, broken into 1,000 pieces, but their pride was not easily destroyed. Far from it. As the last remnants of their fleets drifted into the cold abyss of space, there were whispers of revenge, quiet, fearful murmurs among their remaining allies. They had never seen anything like this. Humanity wasn't just resilient. They were vengeful, unpredictable, and utterly merciless. The galaxy had no idea what it had just unleashed. On Earth, the mood was one of quiet celebration. The war was over, the Council's military destroyed, their capital in ruins. But this wasn't a victory that would be toasted with champagne. No, this was a victory of survival, of humanity's refusal to bow to anyone, especially not an arrogant galactic power that thought it could snuff them out like a candle. Admiral O'Reilly stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, his expression unreadable. The quiet hum of the ship's engine seemed oddly peaceful, as if the entire galaxy had sighed in relief. But O'Reilly wasn't fooled. This wasn't over yet. There would be consequences, and the Council might be down, but they weren't out. "We're getting reports from the outer colonies," Lieutenant Torres said, breaking the silence. "Some of the Council's allies are mobilizing. They might not have the strength to launch a full-scale retaliation, but we can expect trouble soon." O'Reilly nodded slowly. He wasn't worried. "Let them come," he muttered. "We've got a message to send." Meanwhile, on Earth, every major government was already moving to solidify its position. The planet was more unified than it had ever been before. Political lines were blurred as humanity turned inward, focusing all their energy on securing their newfound place in the galaxy. But there was a deeper sense of purpose and unspoken understanding that this wasn't just about victory. This was about asserting dominance, about reminding the galaxy that Earth would never be subjugated again. General Kellner, now commanding the planetary forces, stood on the steps of the rebuilt command center. She could feel the weight of the victory in the air, but there was no time for celebration. The entire galaxy was watching. The Council may have been humiliated, but their allies were not so easily intimidated. "We fought and won. But the real battle is just beginning," Kellner said, addressing the assembly of military and political leaders. "They're watching us. And if we show even a hint of weakness, we'll be right back where we started, under the thumb of empires that think they can control us." The room was silent as her words sank in. They all knew the stakes. The Council's allies would likely regroup, reorganize, and try to exact some form of revenge. Earth couldn't afford to relax. The world needed to stay sharp, stay focused, and never forget why they fought. Back in space, the Vanguard drifted silently, ready for whatever might come next. O'Reilly stood at the helm, eyes scanning the endless horizon of stars. They had won, yes. But the question lingered in his mind. What would humanity do with this victory? It wasn't enough to simply defeat an enemy. Humanity needed to ensure they would never be vulnerable again. "I don't think we're done yet," he said, turning toward Torres. "What's our next move?" Torres looked up from her console, her face steely with determination. "We hit their supply lines. We take control of their communications. We show them that humanity won't just disappear after one fight. We're in this for the long haul." O'Reilly grinned. "That's the plan I like to hear. We don't just want them to fear us, we want them to respect us." The human fleet wasn't just a military force. It was a message. A message that would echo through the galaxy for decades. The Council had thought they were in control, that they could handle whatever Earth threw their way. But what they hadn't counted on was the raw, untamed spirit of humanity. They'd made a fatal mistake in underestimating Earth's willpower. "We're sending a signal to the rest of the galaxy," O'Reilly continued, his voice calm but deadly serious. "We're here. We're not going anywhere. And if you try to take us down, we'll make sure it's the last thing you ever do." His words reverberated across the fleet. It wasn't just a rallying cry, it was a statement of intent. Humanity had made its point. They had been pushed to the edge, and instead of crumbling, they had risen, stronger than ever. The war was over, but their place in the galaxy had just begun. "We'll continue to hold the line," O'Reilly said. "We'll make sure no one ever forgets who we are. And if anyone dares challenge us, we'll show them exactly what happens when you try to push humanity into a corner." It wasn't arrogance, it was the cold, hard truth. Humanity had become a force to be reckoned with. The Council's arrogance had sparked their downfall, but humanity's resilience would leave an indelible mark on the galaxy. And as O'Reilly looked out over the stars, he knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. The galaxy had just gotten a rude awakening, and Earth wasn't going to let them forget it. The galaxy had barely caught its breath when the final storm hit. The Council, in their arrogance, had hoped that humanity's fury would fade once the immediate battle was won. They were wrong. The real war was just beginning, and this time, Earth was coming for everything. Admiral O'Reilly's command center buzzed with activity. The final remnants of the Council's fleet had retreated into deep space, but their allies were regrouping, desperate to salvage some form of respect. O'Reilly wasn't concerned about a few scattered fleets. No, the true battle wasn't going to be fought in the vacuum of space. It was going to be fought in the hearts and minds of every alien species, watching, waiting to see if humanity would cower or strike again. "We've taken control of their outermost colonies," Torres said, her fingers flying over the console. "And we've already set up communication networks. The galaxy's listening." O'Reilly stood by the massive viewport, his hands clasped behind his back. He wasn't a man given to theatrics, but the spectacle that was unfolding in front of him was hard to ignore. The once feared council was now scrambling, trying to keep the galaxy from descending into chaos. And humanity? They were no longer the underdogs. They were the hunters, and every predator in the galaxy now had them in their sights. "We have to make it clear that this is our time," O'Reilly said, turning to face his officers. "Humanity isn't just a power that reacts anymore. We're a power that acts." Meanwhile, on Earth, the political leadership was making sure the message was heard. Governments united for the first time in centuries. Former rivals now sat side by side, united by a single purpose: ensuring that humanity's victory wasn't just a moment in history, but the dawn of an era. "We've received several proposals from other star systems," General Kellner said in a strategy meeting, her voice measured but unyielding. "Some are offering peace, others are suggesting we form alliances. I think we all know what Earth's answer should be." The room fell silent. Kellner's eyes locked onto each leader present. "We don't beg for alliances. We don't need them. We create our own destiny. We don't ask for a place at the table. We take it." Her words carried weight. The leaders nodded in agreement. The time for diplomacy was over. The Council had crossed the line, and humanity wasn't about to beg for scraps in the galactic political arena. Back in the heart of space, the Vanguard continued its march toward the Council's former strongholds. O'Reilly wasn't just fighting for Earth's survival anymore. He was fighting for the future. He wanted to carve a place for humanity that no one could ever take from them. "We have the power now," O'Reilly said, almost to himself. "Let's use it." "Admiral, incoming transmission," Torres called from her station, a slight tremor of urgency in her voice. The display flickered and an alien face appeared, an ambassador from one of the lesser-known species that had once supported the Council. "Admiral O'Reilly," the ambassador began, his voice cautious but respectful, "I bring a message from the remaining Council factions. They wish to discuss terms." O'Reilly's lips curled into a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Terms? After everything they've done?" The ambassador nodded, a nervous twitch in his throat. "Yes. They want to avoid further bloodshed. They want peace." O'Reilly's eyes narrowed. "Tell them something for me. If they wanted peace, they should have never crossed us. Now, they get to live with the consequences." The transmission ended abruptly, but the message was clear. The Council had underestimated humanity's capacity for vengeance. They had assumed that Earth would bend after the first strike, that humanity would be cowed by their superior forces. But that was before the Council had learned what happened when they poked a hornet's nest. Humanity wasn't just a colony anymore. They were a force that would not be ignored. The Vanguard surged forward, pushing deeper into Council territory. Their ships were fast, calculating, and completely unwilling to negotiate. Every move they made was calculated to remind the galaxy of one simple truth: Earth was no longer a backwater planet. It was a power in its own right. "Admiral, we've received word from several allied factions," Torres said, her voice laced with disbelief. "They've started pulling back from the Council's side. The galaxy's slowly shifting." O'Reilly glanced at the tactical map, watching as alien alliances that once stood firm with the Council began to unravel. It was happening faster than he had anticipated. They hadn't just broken the council, they had cracked the foundation of the entire galactic order. The message was rippling outward, reaching every corner of the galaxy. The era of the Galactic Council was over. The silence that followed was almost oppressive. Then O'Reilly spoke, his voice low but firm. "Let them flee. We don't need their alliances. What we need is respect, and I plan to get it, no matter what." Humanity had entered the galaxy's spotlight, and they weren't going anywhere. The Council had learned that Earth wasn't a passive player. They were a force that commanded attention. O'Reilly wasn't just making plans to survive anymore, he was making plans to thrive. "Keep pushing," O'Reilly said, turning back toward the vast expanse of stars. "If they want to negotiate, they can come to us, but don't expect any mercy. We're not the ones who need to apologize." And so, humanity's final message rang clear through the galaxy. No one would ever underestimate Earth again. It wasn't a declaration of peace. It was a warning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Horizons Stories for more thrilling tales of science fiction and adventure. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Because humanity's just getting started, and the galaxy has no idea what's coming.